Hello, my name is Martin Horan. A lot of talk and research these days has gone into the area of motivation, and it's something that's very significant for us in these times particularly, but in fact all the time. There's a theory that I like, and there's a phrase that I like in relation to theories which says there is nothing as practical as a good theory, and I think this is a good one. It's called the equity theory of motivation, developed by a guy called J. Stacey Adams, or John Stacey Adams. And he, through his research, identified a very common phenomenon, which is that individuals, particularly in organizations, often will pick what he called a referent, but for my purposes, I'm going to call them a significant other. And they'll watch and observe and keep an eye on this significant other. Typically, what this would be is a person who joined the organization the same time I did, or somebody who I worked alongside for a significant period of time, and this person becomes my significant other. And what I watch and observe and keep an eye on is their input outcome ratio versus my input outcome ratio. Now, inputs is the time and effort and energy that I invest in the job, my qualifications, my experience, my loyalty. These are all things that I invest in work. Outcomes are what I get out. My pay, obviously top of the list, my title, the perks of the job, the levels of interesting activities that I'm involved in, responsibilities that I have, etc., etc. And I watch him or her and keep an eye on how they're doing, input outcome versus mine. And provided my perception is that these are equal, then that's okay. Am I thrilled, delighted, happy? No. Am I super motivated? No. But am I unhappy? No. I'm sort of neutral. And by the way, this can happen even if my significant other here has gone on to dim and distant heights in the organization, super manager, senior vice president, whatever, and I'm still at the lower level. But my perception is, well, they did a lot of extra academic development. They put themselves forward for massive projects, got overseas experience, etc., etc., etc. And despite the fact that they've done so much better than me, they've, to my way of thinking, have put in the effort, and therefore this still remains the same. That's okay. Now, the moment that there is a perception of inequity, okay? So this can happen in a couple of ways, one of which is he or she went on to get those fantastic promotions that I talked about. But as far as I'm concerned, they didn't put in any extra effort. They didn't do any extra courses. They didn't take on any extra responsibilities. And that's not fair. Now, it can also happen in another way. My significant other is still in the same department as me, working in the next cubicle, okay? So their outcomes are the same. They didn't go on to that senior vice president role. But to my way of thinking, they don't put in the same amount of effort that I do. They don't bring the same figures that I bring. They don't achieve the same targets that I achieve. And maybe they come late and leave early, etc., etc. And that's not fair either. Now, does that sound anyway at all familiar to you? Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's a very common phenomenon. And my advice in this situation is that if this is something that you have tended toward in the past, or indeed currently, the advice is this: stop. Stop comparing yourself to this significant other for two particular reasons. One of which is, let's be charitable and say that your perception here is quite accurate. You're reasonably correct in your perception of what you put in and what you get out. And that's not always the case. Some people think they're much better and doing much harder work than they actually do. But let's assume you're accurate. Almost always, it's almost inevitable that your level of knowledge here is not as accurate. You don't know the whole story about what they're putting in, the time, the effort, the energy, the extra projects, extra responsibilities. You won't necessarily know that. Correspondingly, you don't always know what's here. You might think you do, but not always. That's reason one for stopping. The second reason, remember when I said to you, will you be super motivated, super happy when you find out that there's equity? And I said, no, you'll be kind of neutral. What a poor basis to choose to approach your work and your career. An approach that's going to at best get you to a neutral position, potentially based on information that's actually inaccurate. So stop. If you're a manager or a leader in this situation and people are talking to you about why does he and why does she, my advice to you with them is to strongly discourage that approach, to make it clear to them that what they should be focusing on is themselves, and you will help them in terms of that focus. Fascinating area for us currently, both in terms of our work, our career, and indeed in our lives. Oh, by the way, it doesn't just work on an individual basis. Sometimes between departments or sections, that shower in sales, they get everything and we get nothing. Can happen. And that's also potentially unproductive or counterproductive for us as individuals. So this is an area that I'm going to develop in more detail. In fact, I'm working on the development of a more formal training course in this area. Working on it currently, to be finalized within coming weeks. If you want more information on it or would like to subscribe to attend the course, have a look at my website in coming weeks, martinhoran.com. In the meantime, best of luck.